Y'all, check out this clip of famed attorney Gloria Allred as she voiced her opinion in front of the Diddy trial today, guys. When I tell you she was off the chain, she told it all and let it all. She also gave us a clear understanding from a lawyer's perspective, and she also said that Diddy had a whole bunch of attorneys.
I thought he was.
Sean did it go good health, like smiles and all?
I don't know.
He was smiling. I was in the courtroom.
Okay, good.
Smiling.
You know, I'm sure he's glad that his family is here. Is all I can say. Reporting.
And you know, just we'll let you. You know what I mean?
But the persons who allege they are victims are also entitled to a fair trial. So we'll just wait and see what justice is, because it's going to be based on, or should be based on, the evidence that's admitted in the courtroom. Yes. Nothing else. Not everything is going to be admitted that you may have seen on television. And more may be admitted that you never saw streaming or on television or in the newspaper or heard about in the radio. So I would say everybody should be cautious. He enjoys what we call a presumption of innocence.
Absolutely.
Unless and until he's proven guilty in a court of law. But that's just a presumption. It doesn't mean he is guilty. It doesn't mean he is innocent. It just means that it's the government's burden to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the highest burden in the court of law, because his liberty is at stake. And if he is convicted, he will be sentenced to many years in prison, depending on what he's convicted of.
What will your assumption be? 15, 20 years, 10 years?
There's no assumption. It depends on which crime or crimes he is convicted of.
What was your take on the defense's themes today?
So if he's not convicted, he's not going to be sentenced.
Absolutely.
Kanye West is very familiar with me.
Correct, yeah.
We settled a case a week before our trial was scheduled against Kanye West. They're going to own the domestic violence. That's what they're doing, because there's no defense. We all saw the video. I mean, what possible defense could anybody
Well, he's not
think
being
of?
charged for domestic violence.
Well, that's their point is that they have another number of persons that they allege to be victims who are going to be testifying. So, the argument that the prosecution made today and the argument the defense made, neither of those are evidence. It's just kind of an outline of what they're going to be arguing in this case, what they're going to be.
What's the strongest element for the prosecution's case, do you think?
It depends, because they're alleging a number of different crimes. They're alleging racketeering, for example. And under that, they're seeking to prove also kidnapping, sex trafficking, drugs. Essentially, that his business was a criminal enterprise. And the job of the criminal enterprise, in addition to doing the business and the records and so forth, was to provide him with women with whom he would have sex. And also, they argue sex trafficking is a very serious crime. You'll observe that there was sex trafficking in many other federal trials. For example, R. Kelly trafficking. And I represented a number of victims who testified in the R. Kelly case. He's in prison, and the Court of Appeals affirmed his conviction. So he's in prison for a long time, unless and until the Supreme Court decides to take his case. So, that doesn't happen in every case. So this is a serious case. It's not just about domestic violence. If they can prove he's using his business enterprise to sex traffic women and also engage them in forced labor, that's very serious. So let me just say, my experience with federal prosecutions is they don't prosecute minor offenses, but sex trafficking is what they do. Racketeering is what they do and have charged here. And so I think everybody should just not try to predict what a jury will do. The jury only heard 2 witnesses today. There are many more to come. The defense has an opportunity to present defense witnesses as well. So, defense previewed what they're going to do. They're going to say these were adult women who had choices. They weren't being controlled by Sean Diddy Combs. They made their own choices. Of course, the other side of the argument is, how can women, if acts of violence are being committed against them, if they are threatened, if they are beaten, how can you argue they're making a voluntary choice to engage in sex with a number of men, to be videoed, pornography, all of that? So that's what the challenge is going to be in this case. And we'll see. They're, of course, going to argue defense. They've argued, well, some of these victims, all of these alleged victims, are going to testify engaged in civil lawsuits. So they have a motive, bias to gain money. That's, I think, not an argument that juries should buy in any case. First of all, every person who is a victim has a right to file a civil lawsuit to seek compensation. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? And if they didn't file a civil lawsuit, well, and they just testified in this court of law, then the defense would probably try to find a different argument as to this is about showing bias. They have a right to try to show bias. But again, we'll have to see what the evidence is. He's entitled to a presumption of innocence unless and until he's proven guilty in a court of law beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't know at this point what the defense is. It looked to me that Mr. Combs had over 10 defense lawyers in the courtroom. That's kind of a small army of defense lawyers, and we don't know if all of them are even there. He may have more, somewhere else in an office working on his case.
That's millions and millions of dollars.
He's a wealthy man. His future is at stake, and he can spend whatever he wants on lawyers. But that's a large number of lawyers in the courtroom, so we'll see what they can do. And they had a woman defense lawyer giving the opening statement for the defense in the same way that the prosecution, which is an all-woman, I might add, extremely experienced defense team, because they have, I know some of them in terms of having dealt with them, and I know that they're very experienced and have dealt with other very high-profile sex trafficking cases. That doesn't mean this is one. This is the allegation. This is the theory, part of the theory. More to it. So we'll see.